going to move on to Tim, President and Senior Loan Officer with the Mortgage House. So reverse mortgages tend to be this huge thing that everybody's heard of, but few people know a lot about. And I'm hoping that you can start by giving us the basic overview of what is a reverse mortgage and how does it differ from the standard mortgage that we always talk about, which is also called a forward mortgage.
Right. Thanks, Laura. The basic idea of the reverse mortgage as opposed to the forward mortgage, when you go out and you buy a home, and you do it right now, you go out and you get a 30-year fixed or a 15-year fixed or something like that, and you have a set payment. So you go out and you buy a $100,000 house, and your payment on that is going to be $600 a month, let's say. With a reverse mortgage, what happens is all of the stuff is the same. There's a mortgage, there's a note, there's a deed, all of that stuff remains the same, except you're not making a payment on the house. So the interest actually accrues. So at the end of the first year, on the forward mortgage, you would owe, let's say, $99,000, and on the reverse mortgage at a 6% interest rate, you would owe $106,000 because you haven't made that payment. Now, in both cases, you still have to make your property and insurance payments and stuff like that, but the idea is to switch the cash flow from making a payment to letting the asset absorb that payment for you.
It's kind of nice to think of getting a check instead of paying a check. But
Absolutely.
But we're going to get into the details of that too. So you have a ton of experience in the mortgage industry, and including being on the Mortgage Advisory Board for the state of Michigan. So it tells me you know a lot about mortgages. What made you decide to specialize very specifically in this area of reverse mortgages?
Well, what happened was we are mortgage brokers. So that means that we are independent from any lender that's out there. We don't have to sell a loan to anybody specifically. And what that means is that we go out and we try to find the products that the community needs. So we'll go out there and we'll try and find a zero down program, or we'll try and find a 3% down or something along those lines. And what started to happen was we had people that would come in and they'd say, you know, I need to go get $40,000 to do some repairs to my house. And we'd find a mortgage for them and we'd say, okay, this is going to be the payment, $500 a month or something. And they'd say, well, I can't afford that. So what can we do about that? And we look at some different options, maybe extending the term or whatever. And then we started to hear about reverse mortgages in the early 90s. And it was about that time that we went in and started to do research on this stuff. And we found that there was this product that was out there for seniors 62 or older that could actually use the equity that's in their property to get that money out of it to do what they needed to do with it. So one of the things to keep in mind as far as that is concerned is that when we are starting into the working world, you know, somewhere between 18 and 25 years old, it's wealth accumulation, wealth accumulation, wealth accumulation, wealth accumulation. We go out, we buy cars, we buy houses, we do that stuff. We're putting money into 401ks. We know we're going to have Social Security maybe out there at some point. But we don't talk about what happens when we get a little bit older and all of a sudden we're retiring. And so we go from wealth accumulation to cash flow. So you can have a lot of money, but if you don't have cash flow, there's a problem. The studies that have been done show that the vast majority of wealth in the United States is tied up in people's houses. So you get into a scenario where you go, you've got all this money that's sitting there in your house. How do you get to it? The problem is that to get to it, you have to borrow the money, which creates a payment, or you have to sell the house. Well, you got to live somewhere, so selling the house maybe isn't the best option. So that's where the reverse mortgage kicks in and says, hey, let's start using the equity that you have in the property, which is where your wealth accumulation went to help you afford your cash flow.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about what are the most common ways then that the reverse mortgages are used, and how a reverse mortgage could be used specifically for purchasing a home, because that was something that I was really never familiar with until recently. And I started talking with many of the agents across the country that do what I do in terms of specializing with seniors. And I just kept hearing, oh my gosh, it's helped me with multiple clients. And I didn't necessarily understand exactly how that worked, but basically I'd always heard sort of negative things about reverse mortgages, and I kept hearing, oh no, it's a very, very positive tool when you know how to use it properly.
Yep. So when we first started doing it, the reason we started doing it was people wanted to refinance and then the cash flow issue. So you go out there, the different methods that you can use it as a line of credit. So you set it up. The amount of money that you can borrow is based on your age and the equity in the property. So the older you are, the more you can borrow up to a certain point. So if you start from that basis, you can start with a line of credit. You can do what they refer to as a term loan. So you get a monthly payment for a set amount of time. So you've got somebody that comes in and says, hey, I want to live in the house for the next 5 years. I have some nursing care that I have to happen, and I've got maybe a housekeeper that's going to come in and that. So I need to generate this much money per month to help pay for that. By the way, this is not income. So this doesn't count against any income programs that you would be based on, because technically you're borrowing the money, okay? Mm-hmm. So from there, we were doing them, the term, and then we get to one that's called tenure, and that would be just a set payment for the rest of your life. That dollar amount is a little bit lower than the term, as you can imagine, if you only want 3 years or 5 years or something like that. So we started with the program doing it that way, and then a few years later, people started talking about the reverse mortgage for purchase. And we were like, well, that's kind of cool. How does that work? And so we went in and researched it all and made sure that our lenders did it and all that kind of thing. And basically what started to happen is you had people that were trying to either downsize or move. So we had a case, the people were in North Muskegon, and they wanted to move down to Holland. So they were selling a $250,000 house in North Muskegon that they were going to net out about $125,000, and they were wanting to move down to Holland to be nearer to their grandkids and their family and all that kind of stuff, didn't want to travel too much anymore and all that. So if you know the Holland market at all, there is nothing available for $125,000. So she was, again, in that concern where I can go buy a $250,000 house, but now I'm going to have a payment for $150,000, and now I've got that cash flow issue again. So how am I going to afford this payment, and so on and so forth? We talked to her about doing the reverse mortgage. The way the numbers worked on it was she could go buy the $250,000 house, put the $125,000 that she had down, and not have to make a mortgage payment, because that equity allowed her to do the reverse mortgage. So the only payments that she had to make on the house were for the taxes and insurance. And so we've done that scenario. And actually, we've done that one more often now than we're doing the refinances, because we've got a lot of people that are trying to downsize. They want to get out of the McMansion that they owe so much money on and get into a condo. And so they're wanting to downsize into the condo, but they're not going to generate enough money from the sale of the house to buy the condo cash. Or maybe they do want to do that, pay for it cash, and then turn around and do the reverse mortgage so that they can have the line of credit available to them so they can go buy a car, go on vacation, do whatever they want with it.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. And there's also a lot of myths and misunderstandings. And I also think genuine issues that had happened with reverse mortgages in the past. So if you can speak to what are some of the things that were genuine issues, and why did some of those come about, as well as some of the common myths and misunderstandings that people might have associated with reverse mortgages.
Yeah. So one of the first things that people think when they get a reverse mortgage is, I don't own my house anymore, which is absolutely incorrect. So you own your house. There is nothing different when you get a reverse mortgage as when you get a forward mortgage. So there's still a mortgage note and deed. The asset is still yours. You can choose to do whatever you want to do with that house. You can upgrade it. You can sell it. You can refinance it. You can refinance it into a regular mortgage. You can refinance it into another reverse mortgage if you want to. The issues that were created with the program and the myths that are out there that I'm going to lose my house or I don't own my house, stuff like that, is created from the fact that you have to continue to pay your taxes and your insurance, okay? In a reverse mortgage, there's really only a couple of ways that you would lose your house. One of them is to not live there anymore, okay? When you have a reverse mortgage, one of the agreements is that you're going to continue to occupy the property. If you are no longer capable of occupying the property, they do ask that you pay off the mortgage via selling the property or refinancing it or something along those lines. And then you get into the, I'm sorry, I got lost there for a second. The taxes and insurance. You have to maintain the taxes and insurance. And that's where people started to get into trouble, because they would go into the reverse mortgage thinking that they had an escrow account, and the taxes and insurance weren't being paid. So when you get into that scenario, the reverse mortgage, you can use the equity line to help you pay the taxes and insurance, but if you're not paying the taxes and insurance, the county is going to come after you, or the municipality is going to come and do a tax foreclosure. So in that scenario, that's how you lose that property. There were a lot of other scenarios where you would have grandkids come in and help grandma do the reverse mortgage, pull the money out, and again, the taxes and insurance was the problem. Or they were no longer in the property, and what will happen is the reverse mortgage company once a year verifies that you are still living in that property, and they won't send the letter back that says that we're actively still living in the property. So if that letter gets ignored, they send more letters, they reach out to the family, they reach out to the contacts, and they say, hey, what's going on here? We need to know what's going on. They then potentially could start a foreclosure action, but that's after going to extreme lengths of trying to find out who is there, who's responsible, so on and so forth with that.
And this wasn't really on the questions either, but one of the things that I didn't really realize also was that reverse mortgages are actually a federally protected program.
Yeah, it's through the FHA program. It's called HECM, the Home Equity Conversion Mortgage. It's through HUD. And so the program is out there, and a lot of the things with the program that we were talking about with the last question, a lot of things with the program change every few years, as FHA makes that program stronger and stronger for both the homeowner and for HUD. HUD doesn't want to lose money on this program. Believe me, HUD doesn't want to lose money on anything. But they also want to make sure that they're protecting the seniors, and so that plays into this as well. So the reverse mortgage that somebody got in the mid-'90s actually looks very, very different than the one today. Some of that is to the benefit and to the detriment of the homeowner. As I said before, some of it's based on your age. Well, now they put a cap on it. Now they say you can only borrow up to a certain dollar amount on this reverse mortgage, where back in the early 90s, there wasn't a cap. It literally, if you were 99 years old, they were going to give you 95% of the money right then and there, because they're basically planning on you dying in 2 months.
It's a little bit morbid, I'm just saying.
Yeah, sorry. But the idea is that they've pulled that back a little bit, and some of that is to maintain the equity in that property, so that we don't get into a scenario where it's upside down and stuff like that.
So how do the costs of a reverse mortgage differ from a typical mortgage in terms of like closing costs and things like that? And how much do those differ among providers? So kind of like these other questions, are many of the reverse mortgage providers charging similar fees, or do they vary widely? And how do you help people figure out if they're getting into the right product?
Yep. The first part of the question is the fees themselves. So the fees of getting a reverse mortgage are actually very, very similar to getting a forward mortgage or a regular mortgage. There's appraisal, there's title work, so on and so forth. It is an FHA product, so there's mortgage insurance on it. The mortgage insurance actually kicks in if the loan is upside down. What will happen at that point is it becomes a non-recourse loan. So if there is a debt that exists, it can't come back after your estate. So there is mortgage insurance on it, which is why people look at it and they go, wow, this is a really expensive loan. Well, it's not actually a really expensive loan. It's about the same as getting a regular FHA loan. So the costs are very, very similar on that. FHA, as we talked about before, has been putting stuff in place over the last several years to help protect people. One of the things that they've done just recently is they've actually limited the income that people can make on these. Believe me, these things were cash cows for a lot of people that were very unscrupulous. They could make a ton of money doing reverse mortgages. Well, FHA has pulled their reins back on that quite a bit. So the amount of money that they can make is not as big as it was. It's still pretty decent, and you have to shop around. And that is where then we come into the next part, which is, the lenders are different. People will charge different stuff. Some people are more expensive than others. As with any other financial asset, I would say shop around, gather your information, talk to somebody that you trust. I would recommend that you use somebody local, whether it's me or somebody else, but somebody that you can sit down across the table and talk to, look at the different things. The different products that are out there, when we present a reverse mortgage to somebody, we're required to present several different programs. So you can look at those different programs and see which one is the best one for you. Most of the ones that people are going with right now are actually the adjustable rate mortgages, because they allow the homeowner to get more money, more of that money that they're looking to get to for that cash flow. The fixed rate products don't allow as much, but if it does what you need it to do, it's a very good product as well. Mm-hmm. But it is shop around, shop around, shop around.
Yep. And you actually go through a training program specifically. There's like a minor counseling type program.
Yeah, it's
right?
One of the things that is part of the mortgage process for the homeowner is actually going through a counseling session. I believe that there are some that are free. Most of the ones that I'm familiar with cost about $75. The system, again, going back to FHA trying to make this a very safe product, the system is very A, B, C, D, E, F. We can't jump through that system. Like if you came in and we did the application, I can't jump right to the appraisal if you haven't done your counseling. So we come in, we do the pre-qualification. We actually give you the data that when you talk to the counselor, they can actually pull up the data that we actually gave you. So they're physically looking at the exact same numbers that we gave you. You go through the counseling, then we can do the application, then we can do the appraisal. It goes step by step, and it slows that process down so that you have time to absorb, ask questions, and understand what's going on.
Gotcha. And I do believe Home Repair Services does the reverse mortgage counseling as well. I know they do other financial counseling. I'm not sure if there's a cost on that.
Yeah, there are a couple in Grand Rapids if you want to go and see somebody face-to-face for the counseling.
Great. So what are the most important things for both homeowners, family members, and other support professionals to truly understand within a reverse mortgage when it comes to the time of selling it, or if it's a family member who passes? That, I think, is part of the big questions around this. Well, what happens if mom passes and then all of a sudden we owe money instead of are getting money?
Yep. Well, we start with the first part. Some of the nuances about the reverse mortgages, as I said before, it's not income, so it doesn't impact Medicare, Medicaid, any of those income-based programs. So that's a positive there as far as that part is concerned. There's no escrows, so you have to account for the fact that there's going to be taxes and insurance that you have to pay for. It is a financial tool. It is something that you look at as part of the entire. So some people will use it to defer going into Social Security and say, okay, so I'm going to defer. I'm going to use the reverse mortgage for 5 years so I can defer and get that larger dollar amount later. We all know right now nobody wants to be selling any of their stocks, right? We all want to hang on to those. So it can be used as a tool there. You're borrowing money at a relatively low interest rate, but you're not losing a ton of money because you need to liquidate because you need the cash right now. So that's one of the things right there. But it is a financial tool, and for some people it's not going to be the right financial tool. For other people it will be a great financial tool. And so go into it understanding that. If you're talking to somebody and it's a high-pressure sale, you got to do this, we got to keep moving, you got to step away, walk away from that. Do not go high pressure into a reverse mortgage by any stretch of the imagination. If you're feeling pressured, you're probably dealing with the wrong person. Walk away from it. When you get to the end of the reverse mortgage, there's a couple of interesting things that happen. First of all, if you've got a spouse, when we do a reverse mortgage, we go off the age of the younger person. And you have to be 62 to do the reverse mortgage, but if the spouse is younger than 62, protections have been put in place for that person through the HUD program. When you get to the very end and there's nobody in the house anymore, whether through having passed away or being permanently moved into a nursing home, again, the lender gets notified and they say, okay, so we're not there anymore, so what happens? Well, any of the equity that's in that property, you can refinance it, you can sell the property, but any of the equity would go to the estate, just like it would with a regular mortgage. There's no difference as far as that part is concerned. But what happens if we're upside down, like we were back in 2008? We had a smattering of these things that they owed $200,000 and it was only worth $150,000, right? And what the vast majority of people did was they just handed it back to the bank because the mortgage insurance kicks in and covers that deficiency. So there's no recourse that goes back to the estate to go grab that money back from them from other assets. So you got to kind of look at that and go, that was a win. Now, the interesting thing that also happens is the family at that point, even though the house is underwater, the family at that point can go in and purchase that home for 95% of the value. Not 95% of what's owed, but 95% of the value. So if it's the family farm and one of the grandkids wants to own the family farm, just because it's upside down doesn't mean that they can't go in and purchase it. So they walk into a 5% equity position in that circumstance. So they've tried to set up the program to watch out for the people that are maybe younger than 62 that are going into these, that are spouses, and watch out for future generations that are maybe wanting to keep a family in a home.
And then also, I know that one of the things that surprised me was you showed me a schedule of appreciation and how they're factoring that appreciation on a home that is within a reverse mortgage.
Yeah.
In terms of there still being value to be paid back to the family often.
Yeah. So when you look at it, let's make the math really easy. If you purchased a $200,000 house and you put $100,000 down, and let's say the interest rate today is 6%, and the appreciation rate is 4%. Now that's pretty low for right this second, right?
Oh, it's very low.
But
it's more like 10.
It's really, yeah, it's more like 10. But let's go back over the last 30 years. We're probably somewhere between 3 and 5%, so we'll use 4. So if we've got a $200,000 house and we've got 4% appreciation, that means at the end of the year that house is going to be worth roughly $208,000. We've got the interest rate of 6% on a $100,000 debt. We owe $106,000. We actually are $2,000 ahead every year. And that number is going to continue to grow because even though it's 4%, the 4% is going to outpace the 6% because it's on half the dollar amount. So the program, again, has gone into a system to try and say, we're going to do everything we can to possibly make it so that that asset still exists, that equity is still there, and that we're actually trying to grow that equity as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so often like he's saying, it's either evening out or can even end up to the good in some situations.
To the positive, yep.
Yeah, and the part that I was intrigued with is the fact that they determined that that increase in equity when you are signing the loan, right?
Yeah.
So those schedules are in place before you are signing the loan, so it's not a shot in the dark. You can actually see how they will value that home over time, even 20 years in the future.
Yeah, and you can adjust that if you want to see what does it look like if the appreciation is only 3%, what is the appreciation if it's 6%. So look at stuff like that. And if you've done the line of credit, like let's say you go out and you do the $100,000 line of credit, but you haven't accessed any of the funds, that line of credit will actually grow at the same interest rate that you're paying. So it actually will allow you to get more money as the future goes on.
Okay, I'm still a little bit confused, but that's okay because Tim is somebody that you can reach out to afterwards.
Sometimes we have conversations that go on for hours, and I'm like, you got it? And they're like, we got it. And I'm like, okay, I'll talk to you in 45 minutes when you don't got it anymore.
Exactly. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that I haven't touched upon before we open it up for questions?
Really, as far as the reverse mortgage is concerned, we've been doing them for a really long time, and my mantra is just, it's a financial tool. It's not evil. It's a financial tool. It might be right for you. It might not be right for you. Ask questions. Don't feel pressure, and shop around, and preferably use somebody local.